أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الحمد لله غير مقنوط من رحمتي ولا مقلو نعمتي ولا معيوس من مغفرتي ولا مستنكف من عبادتي الذي لا تبرخ منه رحمة ولا تفقد له نعمة وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب صلوات اللهم صل Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. Inshallah. Kushali Mubarak and Mubarak to all of you on the birthday of our dear 11th Imam, Imam Hasan Askari alayhi salam. Salawat. Allahumma sallam. So I'm beginning with 3 salawats because I can see tired faces and it's Friday, so I'm starting to, although I'm not a wahwa speaker, but I'm just using that technique of khitaba to inshallah energize the crowd, inshallah, okay? And I see it's the usual Mahfili crowd, so maybe I can be a bit open as well, yeah? So maybe in the next 35 minutes, I wanted to take a historical and philosophical approach to our dear 11th Imam's life, to talk about what was the situation at the time of his imama. Number 2 is an exchange he may have had with the famous philosopher Al-Kindi, and 3, to relate that to the title that was advertised, how he and the other imams engaged with scholars of their time, the legacy they left, and how we as Muslims or as human beings ultimately can progress and develop society. Okay? Now, the 11th Imam didn't live very long, approximately 28 years of age. And as you all know, along with his dear father, Ali al-Hadi alayhi salam, they were known as al-Askariyin, the ones who were garrisoned, the ones, if you like, where the army was surrounding them and they were under surveillance. And it is quite difficult when you look at an imam's life that is very short to discuss something that can be very lasting. But there are 2 things which I humbly found. If you read Kitabul Irshad, you'll see that several of the ahadith that Shaykh al-Mufid rahmatullahi alayhi quotes all show that the time that the 11th Imam was appointed as an Imam was actually a very urgent and rather distressful time. Because some people thought that it was going to be Imam Hasan Askari's brother, Muhammad, the other son of Imam al-Hadi, that would be the Imam, to the extent that we have a narration in there where Muhammad is passing and they say, "Oh, Imam, that is Ali al-Hadi, the 10th Imam, is this son of yours going to be the Imam?" And he responds saying, "No, the person who is going to be the next Imam is the person where the matter or affair will rest on his shoulders." And we have several narrations like that. So the first thing is that if you look within Shia history, the 11th Imam's time was a very restrictive time. And 2 is that he was unable to express his intellectual thoughts and leadership freely as, let's say, 5th or 6th Imam. That is one historical fact that we have. Number 2 is that still the 10th Imam and indeed the whole community at that time was looking for a leader that had a particular quality. And in the hadith that I have in front of me, which is from Kitab al-Irshad, the 10th Imam says that my son, he says, no, even though the falsifiers may dislike it, that means there were some people perhaps opposed to Imam Hasan al-Askari being the Imam, my son Abu Muhammad, which is Imam Hasan al-Askari, is the successor after me. He has the knowledge which is needed and he has the equipment of imama. So you have ilm and imama or leadership. So there was still this search and emphasis on somebody being a leader that had the quality of ilm, the quality of engagement and guiding and leading people. And these are not easy qualities to obtain, to the extent that we have another side of his personality coming out, which is when they did try to imprison him, when he was garrisoned and under surveillance by the army, just like the seventh Imam, when the soldiers saw the 11th Imam and had to engage in surveillance of him, they found one thing. They said that, shame on you, what is your involvement in the affairs of this man? And the soldier said, what can we say about a man who fasts throughout the day and stands in prayer through the night, who does not speak and occupies himself with nothing except Allah? When he looks at us, that is the soldiers, our limbs shake, and within us is a feeling which we never had. And when the Abbasids heard this and they were questioning the soldiers that, have you found anything on the 11th Imam? These very Abbasids, under Mutawakkil and others, left in despair. So what is coming out in this very short life of the 11th Imam is that whatever the circumstances of restriction and distress, he could always confide and communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I remind myself, we remind each other, that in times of great distress, we have nobody. Community can leave us, family can leave us, people can leave us, but we can always confide and speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is Sami'un Alim, because He is Wadud, He is the one who is love. So, although it might sound like a simple point, what I find beneficial, at least to me, is how content the 11th Imam was that he did not have the space to express his leadership, but he was able to cultivate his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at times, hankering for position and wanting position or being jealous of others, all these things can come into play. But the 11th Imam didn't want any of that. He wanted to protect his soul. Salawat. So, that brief history leads us to one incident. Now, before I introduce this incident, the incident that I am talking about is an exchange that the 11th Imam apparently had with students of Al-Kindi. Al-Kindi, or known as Al-Kindus, was known as the first Muslim philosopher and polymath. If you read History of Islamic Philosophy by Sayyid Hussein Nasr, you will see that according to the contributors there, they state that he was the first Muslim philosopher, right? Now, the reason why this exchange is important, as some of you have heard, is because Al-Kindi believed the Quran contained contradictions and wrote works about it. The 11th Imam didn't directly meet Al-Kindi, but he met his students. Now, I have obtained this from Manaqib al-Abi Talib by Ibn Shar Ashub and Biharul Anwar, two sources. And there are some secondary sources I consulted. But I want to be honest with you, because you can say, well, these are just a few sources, and this incident may never really have happened. So what is the point of discussing this? Well, two things. We have something recorded, one. But two, even if you want to deny what I'm going to say in the next 10, 15 minutes, what we have as a fact is all the Imams engaged with their opponents or scholars, all of them. So Imam alayhi salam, and I have the khutbah here in sermon 124 or 125 of Nahj Balagha, he engaged with the Khawarij who accused him of going against the Quran. He engaged with them. Fifth and sixth Imam engaged with the different sects and trends during their time. Engaged, dialogue. Eighth Imam in the court of Ma'amun, himself engaged with Christians and Jews and philosophers and rhetoricians. Actually quoting, if you read Uyun al-Akhbar Rida, he says, I know the Torah and I know the Injil. I know the dalil of the philosophers. And he starts engaging with them. So even if people want to deny this, still we have a sunnah of engagement and dialogue from the Imams. That is one. Number two, some dates for you, is that Al-Kindi was 17 years old, this Muslim philosopher. He was 17 years old at the time of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rada alayhi salam, the time of our 8th Imam. He was approximately 34 years at the time the 9th Imam was living. He was around 67 years when the 10th Imam was living, and he was about 72 years of age when Imam Hasan Askari was living. And please remember that Imam Hasan Askari lived in Samarra. Al-Kindi was in Baghdad. So they were aware, Al-Kindi was aware of the Imams, we may argue, and he was virtually in the same region as some of the Imams, especially 10th and 11th Imam. And 10th Imam died at approximately age 40. So I don't think that it is a stretch to say that scholars were completely unaware of the Imams. They were aware of some of the teachings. There may have been some engagement. And if there was freedom, like in the 5th and 6th Imams and maybe 8th Imam's time, then there would have been more engagement. Now, why is this incident that I'm narrating to you important? For me at least, the way the 11th Imam deals with scholars who opposed him, I think is very important today for the Shia community, for any religious community. I think we have a lot to learn from, and maybe we have forgotten the sunnah of our dear prophets and Imams. Now, what happened? As some of you may have heard this incident maybe when you were young or later, is that the Tullab, the students of Al-Kindi, met the 11th Imam. And they told the 11th Imam that our teacher Al-Kindi is busying himself in writing works about the Quran containing contradictions and various errors. The 11th Imam has a very beautiful response. He doesn't say, off with him, or exclude him, or ban him, or I don't want to engage with him. He says to the dear student, says, look, I want to tell you something. When you are attending his lesson, when you have gained his friendship, when you are comfortable with him and you are helping him and he's comfortable with you, when there is that respect there and a beautiful relationship, ask him this question, that is it possible that the speaker, mutakallim, the speaker of the Quran means other things or has other ma'ana, has other meanings than the one Al-Kindi is thinking of? Is it possible that somebody that speaks or writes means other things, or the verse of the Quran contains other meanings than the one you or I thought of? Like when we read the Quran, we think it means something, but it could mean something else. And they take this lesson and they go back to Al-Kindi. And they are attending a lesson and they do exactly what the 11th Imam says. They are very respectful, they are comfortable, they don't challenge him. Then they raise their hand and say, we have a question. And they ask this question about different meanings of the Quran or the intentions of the speaker when he is speaking. And Al-Kindi is very surprised about this question, saying, from where did you obtain this knowledge that a speaker could have other meanings? And they said, we thought of it ourselves. Students want to take credit, right? And then he says, no, I didn't teach you this, so where did you get it from? And it says in the hadith that we got this from a member of the Ahlul Bayt, right? It could only have come from there. And that is when Al-Kindi realizes that if you have got this from Ahlul Bayt, and I understand what this sentence means, then I will stop writing these works of mine and I will burn my books of contradiction, and I will, alaykum salam, and I will follow this teaching of Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam. Okay? So this is the gist of the incident. Engagement, dialogue, and the students of Al-Kindi correcting the students correcting Al-Kindi. Why is this relevant? Because when we look at the 11th Imam engaging in this way, when we look at the 8th Imam saying that I will use Injil and Torah to debate with the Christian and Jewish scholars. When you look at 5th and 6th Imam, still at that time, by the way, members of the Khawarij were still existing during 5th and 6th Imam's time. Or members of the Batini sect, perhaps later known as the Ismailis, emerged. All these debates we have present, some within Kitab al-Irshad, some within Uyun Akhbar Rida, and some in other sources you will find. But if you look at this trend, you find this beautiful sense of engaging with the other and not excluding them from the conversation, having dialogue. And number two is, which is I think the most important lesson, is the Imams never stopped pursuit of knowledge. He never told the students of Al-Kindi, just stop him from studying. Stop him from giving lectures. Stop him from giving speeches. Stop him from writing. He never said that. I mean, I have not found that anywhere. Even in the debates recorded in the 8th Imam's time, I've never seen the 8th Imam say that. All they do is they read the sources which the other scholars are saying and try to disprove where they feel it's wrong. And they let the public judge. It's wonderful. This is actually our sunnah. It is the sunnah of the Shia. It is the sunnah, to be honest, of the Rasul, and the sunnah of the Imams. And if you look, just to give you one specific example, okay? In Sermon 125 of Nahjul Balagha, when the Khawarij are accusing Imam Ali alayhi salam, this is after or during Battle of Siffin, where they are saying, why are you engaging in tahkim, arbitration with Muawiyah? Why should you deal with Muawiyah? You are going against the Quran. This is a matter for Allah to decide. Imam Ali responds by saying, هذا القرآن إنما هو خط مستور بين الدفتين لا ينطق باللسان ولا بد له من ترجمان. Says this Quran is only hidden lines between two covers. I'm using mobile phone now. Don't even pick it. Let's not be disrespectful. Okay? I don't like technology. This Quran, right? This Quran is just two covers. And it doesn't speak. Quran doesn't speak. It requires an interpreter. Even Imam Ali during that time, straight after the Prophet, he's not claiming that interpretation is only going to be carried out by Imams and nobody else. He's saying the Khawarij themselves should think about what the Quran is saying, understand it, don't expect to follow the Quran literally. So even at that time, Imam Ali's and the Imam's arguments, right to 11th Imam, were quite sophisticated, trying to talk about interpretation, trying to talk about ma'ana, trying to talk about dialogue. So this is how, it appears to me, they were developing the society so that even if 11th Imam was al-Askariyain, that means garrisoned, even though he only lived till 28 years of age, or our 12th Imam had to go into ghaiba, whatever it is, they were preparing the community how to handle differences of opinion, engagement, and dialogue. It's wonderful. We have a set of principles of how to do this. Salawat. How does this sort of impact us today? Now, I was reading Ibn Rushd's Faslul Maqal, which is known as the Decisive Treatise. It is actually translated into English. It's not that the book isn't that big if you want to buy it, right? And Ibn Rushd, I read the first 20 pages, and I'm just summarizing 5-6 arguments for us, is that the book relates to exactly what 11th Imam is doing, but it is about people who are arguing against philosophy and reflection, and how human society should progress. This is the first sort of 10, 20 pages that he's discussing. And for me, at least, as a researcher, I always wonder that where are the Muslims when it comes to advances in a variety of fields like science or medicine, internet technology, digital technology, AI? Where are Muslim advances in this field, and other in law and in other places. Because we know from history that we were pioneers, like Khaja Nasiruddin Tusi in astronomy or Ibn Sina in medicine. And you all know these things. I don't want to repeat it. But what I want to know is what happened within our intellectual history that we lost or reduced our passion for worldly knowledge and developing society. If today there is a problem in the society, do we as Muslims have a solution for it? Not too long ago, maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, I had to just give a small majlis, like family majlis, and I was talking about Suratul Zilzal. And today, of course, like here and other centers, we have this movement of bringing like not disposable, your own cups and plates and these things, right? It's now a big thing, and if you don't do it, you're not allowed to eat, as I've heard in some places. Not here, maybe in other places, right? So there is this big trend of bringing your own things and not using plastic, right? And if you read, I'm not saying Quran contains everything, but if you read Suratul Zilzal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the day of the zilzal, the earthquake, okay, is the day when the earth will release its burdens. And if you read the tafsir, by the way, the burdens has a variety of meanings. One is what we did to the earth. The other is people's sins, the sins that we did. And then if you read the end of the surah, it says whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of bad will see it, right? Now, I'm not a scientist or anything, okay? But if you just reflect on that, you get a very obvious meaning, which is looking after the earth, okay? And two, which is even atoms, dharra, the atom. Now, atoms can come, everything is made up of atoms. So when Allah says you will see the deeds, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean I will see the effects of my deeds scientifically? Will my soul also be able to see that or experience that or feel that? I mean, what does that mean to think of atoms and how the soul is and deeds and things about the earth? And we've had this surah for over 14 centuries, but only now we feel like being very environmental. I'm just saying that if we had a scholar like Khaja Nasiruddin Tusi, who was a bit advanced for his time, maybe we would have an environmental policy and we would have been leaders of the environment by now. But the only reason we're doing it is because the society wants us to do it. And we thought, you know what, schools are doing it, universities are doing it, and somebody has a bright idea in the community, now let's do it. And then everybody says, yeah, let's do it. But my point is we don't seem to originally reflect on what our sources have to offer to try to create our own solutions. This is just one small example I'm giving you. To support this, what are Ibn Rushd's arguments? And it's Averroes, by the way, his Latin name, if you want. Very beautiful. I'm only going to summarize 5, okay? And I'll do it very quickly, inshallah. Number 1, he says that why should we reflect in society? Why should we reflect and engage in this pursuit of knowledge? What are his arguments? He says, Allah or God is the Sani'. Sani' means maker or artisan, if you like, the designer. God has designed things. God has made things, he says. We are the mawjudat or makhluqat. We are the things that Allah has created and the existing things, right? So he poses a question. How are we meant to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now, maybe a simplistic answer is, all you have to do is read Quran, pray, and do your a'mal, do Ramadan, Muharram, go ziyarah, Hajj, you will know Allah. He doesn't say that. What does he say? He says something even deeper than that. The only way you can know Allah is to know and understand the things that He has created. Look how beautiful this is. It's simple, but it's beautiful. If I understand how a tree is created or a tree is made, right? I mean, just, my daughter goes to forest school. I don't know if you have parents, you do these things, right? And I bought a book about nature and trees and all that. And I've learned how to measure a tree now, by the way. It's just knowledge. Standing 5-10 steps away from it, and you bend down, and the steps you take, you multiply that, you can work out the lifetime of a tree, by the way, right? Sorry, this is useless knowledge. But, or maybe it has use. The point is that we have to fall in love with the things that Allah has created to know Him, to know the beautiful handiwork and how He has designed things. This notion that we have that there is religious knowledge and secular knowledge, there is material knowledge and immaterial knowledge, there is traditional knowledge and modern knowledge. This doesn't exist in Islam. There is no such thing of that in the Quran. And He proves it. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Surah number 88, Surah Al-Ghashiyah. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبَلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ. Will they not consider how the camels are created, the camels that can store water for days, and the heaven, how it is reared aloft? We should understand how a camel is created and the biological functions of a camel. And we should be advanced in that, because we will fall in love with the designer that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But yet today, if you look at Muslim scholarship, we do not focus on what we now say is the physical sciences. We don't focus on that. We don't focus on maths. We don't focus on all these things which you learn at school and then you stop learning. But we should focus on them because it brings us closer to how things are designed. We understand their purpose, and then we can better live in our society. So today, AI is one of the most important things today, right? Robotic technology and AI. Today, in the top law firms, robots are replacing paralegals and legal administrators. We should understand how robots function, and we should be advanced in that to understand that, can the robot do tawaf for us if we want? I'm giving you an example. We have to consider as outlandish questions as possible, because it is going to be a reality. What fight will there be between husband and wife when the robot will be hovering? Maybe they'll find something else to fight about, right? But this is my point, is when divorces occur and this thing is happening, well, let's think. How are robots going to change private family life? Let's investigate this. This is his first argument. Let's try to understand what Allah has created. Number 2, then he says that if we are to reflect, engage in tafakkur of the mawjudat, he says falsafa, philosophy is nothing more than reflection. So, because at that time, as you know, Ghazali was writing against the philosophers. So he was saying, but wait, reflection is a natural human quality. And philosophizing is nothing more than reflection. So if reflection is nothing more, or if philosophy is nothing more than reflection, then we have to reflect, engage in philosophy, and a more complete understanding of of a thing means we'll have a more complete understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything, by the way. So if I understand human psychology, the way human beings think, I'm going to get a bit closer to the way Allah thinks, to the way He implanted fitra in us. So the second argument is engage in philosophy because it is reflection, and try to understand things completely. And then he cites further verses of the Quran. In Surah Al-An'am, verse 75, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِيَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. And thus we did show to Ibrahim the kingdom of the heavens and the earth, and that he might be those who are sure. So he said, now he thinks, because people might quote the Quran and say, oh, well, prophets have this knowledge, they don't need to engage in reflection. But look at his argument, he says, no. Even the prophets were taught or had themselves to engage in tafakkur to understand how the kingdom of the heavens and the earth are created, so they are sure. So they increase in their knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we honestly going to say that the prophet's knowledge, Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, while he was a child, was exactly the same when he went to Mi'raj? No, there was a development in the Prophet. Because at the time of Mi'raj, what was unveiled to him? the layers of the heaven, the layers of the hell, the malaika, all of these things were unveiled to him. This was his development, this was his increase in reflection, just as it says in the Quran when it comes to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So that is the third aspect. Then we have various ahadith. Afdalul ibadatu tafakkur. The most noblest of worship is tafakkur. Even Imam alayhi salam says the following. I just put two ahadith here from Nawj Balagha. He says, Al-ilmu wirathatun karimatun wal adabul khulalun mujaddadatun wal fikru mir'atun safiyatun. Knowledge is a noble inheritance. Knowledge. If it's anything we or the Muslim society should leave behind, it should be knowledge. Nothing else. Knowledge. Good etiquettes are new clothes. It's like when you have a good adab, manners, it's like you've put a new garment on. It's like when people see you, say, wow, today you are positive, you are smiling, you are generous. You know, we say you've got out the bed of the right side, for example, we say, right? Because it's like an increase in akhlaq is like a new garment. It's like a new piece of clothing. And then Imam Ali says, reflection is a clear mirror. Reflection itself, tafakkur, is nothing to be scared of. Asking these outlandish questions as I have done, we should do it because it brings us to a point where we clearly understand a problem. This is one hadith of Imam Ali Islam. A second one, hadith number 80. Al-hikmatu dhallatul mu'mini fa khudhil hikmata walau min ahlin nifaq. He says, wisdom is an astray thing or a lost thing of the believer. So take the wisdom, even it is from the people of hypocrisy. So what do we have to be afraid of for listening to somebody that is a kafir, somebody that is a hypocrite, somebody that is a non-Muslim, somebody that is a secular person? We have nothing to be afraid of. Why? Because wisdom itself can be taken out. Even if somebody is lying to you, right? Again, I'm not a psychologist or CIA and all these things where they can interpret human behavior and all that. Even if somebody is lying to you, you can extract something that he is hiding. Or you know that he's hiding something. You know there's some true thing that he's hiding. Even if somebody is manipulating something, you're able to extract something, some wisdom from it. So why should anybody be afraid of learning anything new or learning any type of new knowledge? This is the third argument. 2 and 3 final arguments, and then I'll end. The fourth one, he says, is that if you engage in reflection, then you have to engage in burhan. Burhan means demonstration or evidence. We can't just reflect and come up with anything because some of our thoughts may be wrong. So he says we have to engage in qiyasul aqli. That means intellectual syllogism. That means logic. Engage in the right arguments and have a natija, conclusion which follows from its premises, right? The fifth one, and these two you might find a bit more interesting. He says that human knowledge is evolutionary. That means we can only learn things by looking at what people have done from the past. We must consult what was written 1,000 years ago and 500 years ago. We must. Because people have written on these things, whether logic, philosophy, science, we should look at these things. Anything they've missed out, we develop it. And if they've missed out or they got it wrong, he says, we should forgive them. We shouldn't revile them, we shouldn't just criticize, we should forgive them. And we should move on with their knowledge. We do it with the Quran. Quran was revealed over 14 centuries ago, but we still use it. Our hadith, we still examine it and try to use it, so we should do that with any book. And then he says, it is impossible for one person to gain knowledge. One person to gain full knowledge, by the way. Now, sometimes religious communities have a mentality that I must consult only one scholar. The Maulana, the Sheikh, the Rabbi, the priest. Where have we obtained this thinking that only one scholar will know everything? In Suratul An'am, verse 50, the Prophet, our beloved Prophet says, I am just a messenger and express what is revealed to me. I do not know the hidden treasures of the world. I am not an angel, right? I don't know the unseen knowledge except that which is revealed to me, except a little. Even the prophet does not claim that he has full knowledge. So even if we were living straight after the prophet, we would not have many ahadith that were later transmitted or expressed by the later imams in other areas of fiqh, because the prophet only left a bit of a corpus of hadith, sometimes in family law or criminal law and aqd contract, not other things. So what would we do? We would try to gain knowledge. We would try to seek knowledge from those who know. So he says we should not think that only one person has knowledge. And the final argument, which I like, and he gives two examples here. He says that some people think that you should not teach people new knowledge or encourage people to reflect as the 11th Imam did or as 10th Imam did. You shouldn't do that because people will get confused. Don't start bringing controversial issues. Don't start engaging dialogue. People will get confused. And he gives two examples. He says one day a friend went to the prophet, and the friend had a brother. The brother had a very bad stomach upset. So he goes to the prophet and says, Prophet, what medicine would you recommend? He says, tell your brother to take honey, have honey, because honey will cure it. So he gives the honey to this friend, the friend gives it to the brother. And after a while, he sees that his brother is not improving and perhaps gets worse. So then he goes back to the prophet angrily and says, Prophet, you are wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You've prescribed the wrong medicine. Then the prophet gives this response. Allah was true and right and spoke the truth when he said that honey was the cure. Honey is the cure. I was not wrong there. But your brother's stomach lied, or your brother's stomach could not take the honey, which means that either the brother was lying or misdiagnosed himself, or due to accidental things with his body could not take the honey. But it doesn't mean honey is bad. Doesn't mean honey is not a cure. You see that? So if you are engaging in new knowledge, dialogue, reflection, doesn't mean asking a question and reflection is bad. That is good in itself, as it says in Quran, as it says in Hadith. It is that people themselves do not have the appreciation or the ability to appreciate what you are doing. And he gives a second example. He says, it's like water. He gives the example of water, which might be a better example. He says, consider water. Water quenches thirst. But some people choke on water. So it's like people saying, don't give water to people even though they're dying of thirst, because some people are going to choke on it. Does that make sense to you? If people are going to choke on it, it's because they don't know how to drink the water or they've got a problem with their throat. It doesn't mean you throw away the water. It doesn't mean you allow other people to die of thirst. So just because somebody, as in the 11th Imam's time, is engaging in new knowledge or asking questions, doesn't mean you ban and exclude him. No, because you are depriving others of that knowledge. That is nobody's right to do that. The Imams never did that. And so his last argument is, do not throw away wisdom and knowledge just because a few people cannot take it or understand it or react. Salawat. I want to end in only 2 minutes with a historical incident and then just conclude with the 11th Imam. Where did this understanding come from? Where we must put people into groups. For example, you have traditional Muslims or scholars, modern Muslims or scholars, right? You have, for example, we say Shia and Sunni, okay, that is there. But you, for example, you have people that believe that God is a punisher and other people that believe God is merciful, right? Where did we come up with these terms and groups to divide scholars and Muslims? Like you have people who are philosophers and you have people who are engaging in fiqh, and they can't work together. Where did we get these groups from? Now, there are a number of incidents in history, but I'm just going to cite to you one. There was a caliph called Khalif al-Qadir, which you may have read about. Khalif al-Qadir existed during the 10th and 11th century. He was caliph during 991 AD to 1031 AD. Okay? He was part of the Abbasid Caliphate. Right? Now, he decided, in order to prolong his dynasty, and in order to make sure that madaris, the madrasas of the time, were teaching one creed only, he enlisted scholars to sanction other scholars, so that if a scholar, for example, started to teach or engage in usul al-fiqh or philosophy, they would not be allowed to teach in the madrasa or teach in public. If they had an idea which was different to the Qadri creed. The Qadri was a creed. He made an aqidah, basically. So you know, today we say there is usul ad-din. Where did this usul ad-din come from? Where did this concept of usul ad-din come from? One reason where it came from were the caliphs during the olden times, like Abbasids, who set up a creed. You have to believe in X, Y, and Z. And if you believe in X, Y, and Z, you are considered as a devout Muslim. But if you don't believe in X, Y, and Z, you are not entitled to teach or lecture in the mosque or madrasa. This was Caliph al-Qadri's view, and I want to give you proof of this, right? What he did is that he divided people in groups. The scholar, Dhahabi was the teacher of Ibn Kathir, the famous Sunni historian and Mufassir. Dhahabi, okay, he lists two groups of scholars in his works, okay? And his list is preserved in Suyuti's Tariq al-Khulafa. This is very interesting, right? In this work, Suyuti and Dhahabi list two groups of scholars. Salawat, please. The first group are the group that are excluded from the Muslim Qadri creed and are not entitled to teach in the madrasa. Who are these scholars? You might recognize a few of their names, by the way. In this period, the head of the Asha'ira, Abu Ishaq al-Isfaraini, the head of the Mu'tazila, Qadi Abdul Jabbar, the head of the Rafida, that is the Shia, Ash-Shaykh al-Mufid, okay? The head of the Karramiya, Muhammad ibn Haydam. All of these scholars, according to him, were not proper or devout, or now we use this word, mainstream scholars. They were not the mainstream and orthodox scholars, according to them. We follow Sheikh Mufid, yes? I mean, we respect him, we read his works. But during that time, he was excluded in society, right? So who are the scholars he thinks are the acceptable scholars, right? Well, this is now the second list. The head of the Quranic scholars, he says, Abdul Hasan al-Hamami. Then he lists the head of the Hadith scholars, Abdul Ghani ibn Sa'id, the head of the Sufis, the head of the poets, the head of the calligraphers, the head of the kings, and he goes on and on. So the first group are the group that are excluded from the scholarly circle and the Muslim communities. And that was us, we were excluded. That's why Shias traditionally were a minority. But the second group were the acceptable, the devout scholars. And today, whether it's Shia, Sunni, Christian, Jew, any community, don't we at times do the same? A person that has a different idea, we say, he is not really part of our creed. He is not really part of the Muslim group of scholars. So I want to conclude by this. It is sad today, and I'm talking about any religious community, that we may use tactics that were used by Mutawakkil and the Abbasid Khulafa against the Imams. Yes, the Imams were banned. Yes, the Imams were excluded. But this is not the sunnah of the Prophet or Imams. It's not the sunnah of a religious person. This was the sunnah of the Umayyads and the Abbasids who sought to exclude. But our beloved 11th Imam taught us to engage in dialogue with politeness, with precision, with logic. And that was the legacy of Rasulullah, the legacy of Ali ibn Abi Talib continued on. And inshallah, it's a humble reminder to us all to develop and advance our societies in accordance with these enduring principles, inshallah. Salawat. Please can we recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all the marhumeen, mu'minin, all human beings, all people who are ill in society. May Allah grant them shafa. May we try to help them, inshallah. Surah Al-Fatiha, please.
Thank you very much for that talk. We now have some time for some questions.
Assalamualaikum, Sheikh. Thank you so much for your talk, as usual. Very insightful, lots of food for thought. I've just got more of my own thoughts on the type of the issue you mentioned with Muslimin and science. I think I'm caught in a place where, I'm involved in technology, and also I hear, that what other non-Muslims say about Muslims and where they are. To be honest, even though I'm, Iraqi, I almost hear it almost as a statement often against Arabs. To be honest, especially with the context of investment of Saudis pumping lots of money into Uber and everything else, and they don't really know what they're talking about. And we see it with the Anthony Joshua fight tomorrow. Yes, they're holding this event, and it's sport washing. It's just a boxing event. So, and also it's held in the context often as well where we hear atheists such as Dawkins, who very famously says, one of his main arguments against Islam being a false religion, astaghfirullah, is that Muslims haven't come up with anything since the Abbasid time, which is complete nonsense. So I think there's two issues. Obviously, places like Al-Mustansiriya and Baghdad hasn't produced anything meaningful for a long time, but Muslims have. I've developed AI. It's used by millions of people. I know Muslims here in the UK that are leading blockchain, that have made online banks. I know Muslims that have one of the top 20 fastest growing companies in America. I've at one point had an office in Pakistan, and all these guys worked for Microsoft and were the most amazing people. Places like Lahore are incredibly vibrant, intelligent places. So I think there's that one side when, there are amazing Muslims, but I think also, there's no sugarcoating that Muslims, just like other parts of the world, are still stuck in post-colonial mindset, and they have restrictions on what they can do. Why is it that London is still the number 1 place for Sharia-compliant investments, and the Muslims are? There's many other things. Trading of Chinese currency. Again, the UK and Europe does more trading in Chinese currency than China does. Iqbal will probably say I'm wrong. He's definitely right. Whatever he plans to say. My point is, there are legacy issues that we're stuck with as Muslims. And Africa, Middle East are kind of the same, whether they're Muslim or Christian. You can even take, Southeast Asia, the Muslim parts of Southeast Asia, and compare, Indonesia with South Korea. There's no comparison. South Korea is far ahead. But I don't think it's because Indonesia is Muslim. But obviously, so you're right. We're not where we should be we're not where, Ibn Rushd was. We're not where Andalusia was. We're not where Mustansiriya or Cairo or Fez or, all the other, Samarkand, the countless centers we had over the centuries. But equally, I think there is, I came across a guy of Pakistani origin in Canada who's invented a microchip that can go in the brain. He's won the highest honor in Canada.
Jazakallah, brother. I agree with you. I was pointing to more of the culture in the society. No. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I agree we have individual Muslims that are doing wonderful things. I was in Boston for Muharram in September, and there I was able to visit like Harvard, MIT. It's the biotech hub of the world, or the West, maybe we can say. And I was amazed to see some of our fellow brothers making advancements there, to be very honest. So I agree with you. And I think you've mentioned wonderful examples. I think we should give credit to individual Muslims who try. I guess I just agree with your sentiment that I wish that we had a culture and center of learning we're leaving a legacy of that, right? I think this is where I feel sad, basically. Yeah, yeah.
Assalamualaikum, Sheikh. I came a bit late to the lecture, so I missed some of it. I just wanted to touch on your point about how, when you said we should be looking more at the life sciences and research into that, do you mean we as individuals or as leaders?
I think both. I think if you or we're involved in a field, we should try to think developing something original within it, and leaders as well, as the dear brother mentioned, about kind of leading development, creating centers of learning that are quite original. So I mean both, if possible.
I mean, so what happens when our leaders come up with whatever they claim to be experts in, but then other so-called leaders also then contradict that? For example, if we have astronomy and moon sighting,
Right.
someone might claim to be the expert in that, but the other Maraji will disagree with that ruling.
Okay, I think there are two things. What I was emphasizing more was kind of the life sciences, right? Not fiqh as such, but you can make advancement in fiqh. Yes, I'll come on to that. But in terms of discovery, scientific progress, and some of the contemporary issues that we face, right? Bitcoin or whatever it is, I think whether agree or disagreement is just a matter of coming up with original ideas and testing it out. So I think that's not a controversial area. When it comes to fiqh, yeah, I think that there can be difference of opinion, but as I said, I think that's more to do with the fact that our immaturity, Jazakallah, more to do with our immaturity in how we handle difference of opinion. I think that's a maturity issue. Because nobody stops you from following another scholar or agreeing with another scholar if you feel his view is more sophisticated. I think we should have the freedom to do that. Why not? Yeah, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Just developing on what you just said,
Yeah.
in terms of our outlook and where our traditional Hausa studies have developed, a lot of engagement I've had with the tutors and the academicians within the traditional Hausa seems to be so entrenched in the fiqh and jurisprudential centers, and excuse me for saying, kind of almost devoid of the akhlaqi or the ethical perspective, and even further devoid from the contextual application. So you just mentioned Bitcoin, and just to jump on your example, we're more likely to ask, what is the fiqh ruling for trading in Bitcoin? How are you going to zakat and khums and sadaqah Bitcoin? Rather than saying, is it the fairest way to redistribute income? I don't care how it gets taxed within the Islamic system, whether the Islamic system is even fit for purpose in terms of where all this happens. And in terms of our innovation, how can we drive that spirit back of saying, we're looking for solutions. We're not trying to retrospectively fit something that sounds Islamic, has some Arabic terminology to it, and it sounds a bit cool that Muslims are now doing this. Are we going to be innovators because of our Islam, or successful people despite our Islam?
Okay, Jazakallah Muqtabar. Very, very nicely put, mashallah. Thank you. I think what you said at the end, that at the moment, I think we are successful in spite of Islam, in the sense that Islam, as beautiful as religion as it is, it appears to me, and maybe to you, that it doesn't seem to, or we are not as inspired by it as some of our previous scholars 7, 8 centuries were, like the astronomy and medicine and things like that. So I agree with you at the end there. How we drive it, you're right, I agree with your analysis that we need to expand the Hawzawi sciences, more ethical, contextual and all that. But I think one way is, I think we must encourage the next generation, if they're thinking of Islamic scholarship, we should encourage them to develop their own fields and reflect on some of our Quran and Hadith where possible, but say that, look, I've developed, as the brother said, I've developed a microchip in the brain or a new robot or whatever it is, and the functioning of that is to improve society in this way because it tallies with the objectives of the Quran in X, Y, and Z. It's not just a secular application, but it's to improve humanity, to give it a religious and a spiritual application, right? And I think maybe that is sometimes what is missing from the next generation, that as successful as they are as lawyers and pharmacists and opticians, maybe we should also encourage them and say, what is the application in developing society in terms of the objectives of Quran? And you don't need to be a scholar to extract those objectives of Quran. It's quite apparent from the Quran itself, right? So how does a technological advancement improve qist, fairness, and adala? How does it improve mizan, for example? I think that maybe to answer your question, how we drive that is we must encourage the next generation to think of that, rather than just thinking in a secular way that I'm top of my profession and I'm providing family and earning, but is there something else they can do? But the bigger question is a harder one, because what you're also asking is to change hundreds of years of entrenchment of looking at particular sciences in a particular way. And that's very difficult, I think.
With your permission,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the chair's permission.
Yeah.
I mean, don't the results to speak for themselves? If hundreds of years have got us to where we want to be,
Yeah.
we want the next 100 years to be where we are,
I-
and further there. But also, this distinction for saying, is what you're proposing got any roots in the Hausa or not? Rather than saying, has what you're proposing got any application in the real world? If its application in the real world has something, and you're not retrofitting Islam onto it, then shouldn't that be the driving force to say your akhlaq, your wanting to serve humanity, will not just happen through your khums, zakat, sadaqah, and praying the qaza namaz for 100 years,
Yeah.
but it'll actually be driven by your desire to, in your day-to-day, serve humanity through excellence in what you do, inspired by Islam. I mean, I remain inspired by the potential of where our faith can be. And I'd love anyone within the Hausa system to say that it's a Western concept of morality and akhlaq that you're seeking to bring into the Hausa system that's so deeply entrenched in fiqh. So if it is such a wonderful concept of our morality and our akhlaq, and all that we look into our hadith for is inspiration there, but all we seem to be deriving from it is the do's and don'ts, the criminal code, below which you fail the system to do it. Can I go so far as to say, is it fiqh or fiction that we seem to be buying into?
Okay. No, I'm fine. I think you must give the majlis next time, Mukhtar bhai. Inshallah. So I'll stop after 20 minutes, then you take over. Look, the reason I talked about Hausa is because ultimately Muslim believers, right, are going to take a scholar more seriously that has come from a Hausawi background and is going to educate them about their life. Rather than somebody that is a life coach, or during my time it was Mr. Motivator. I don't know if you guys remember. Yeah, you guys remember, yeah. So if Mr. Motivator comes in, okay, some people like him, but they're not gonna apply that in their life religiously. Come on, let's be very honest here. They will take the religious advice from somebody that is religiously qualified. And this is where the issue is. Because if you can't change the intellectual approach to religion in the Hausas, you can't change the average conception of Islam of the Muslim believer. It's very difficult. As much as you, Mukhtar Bhai, may give excellence, and I will be inspired by it, doesn't mean other people will be, in terms of improving their spirituality and lifestyle and religion, because they want a stamp of authority on it. And the issue I have is that stamp of authority has become narrower and narrower over centuries. That's the issue that I have. Whereas if we were living in Ibn Sina's time, I would be following Ibn Sina, learning medicine, but learning about his spirituality, learning about his dedication. Everything would be a package, right? Exactly, but now it's not a package. We get something from there and something from there, which is fine, but then we become divided individuals, essentially. And then our children, maybe I have 2 children, so I'm not experienced parent, but I want them to grow up having confidence in their identity, not just saying, well, okay, now that I leave the house, I am somebody else, which I think is the biggest problem we face, right? A split identity crisis.
But that's also how, sorry,
Yeah.
how Ibn Sina saw him.
Yeah.
Ibn Sina
Yeah.
saw him as all of that. For him, medicine couldn't come without spirituality
Yes.
or science.
Yes.
They had to come together.
Yes, and if you read his biography, he says, if I'm correct, he gave people medicine and healed people for free. He considered it like a spiritual duty. I mean, we have Hippocratic Oath, we have doctors here, Kumail and others, they can educate me more, right? But my point is that there was a deeply spiritual force driving him, right, I think. This lecture is a spiritual duty ultimately, right? So,
Do we have time for one more question from the ladies, please?
he's trying to save himself because, yeah.
I think you mentioned, you mentioned that the imams they did dialogue with their opponents, and so nowadays when you see like people cursing or saying awful things about the Prophet or in Islam and things like that, obviously, like with the example of satanic verses, there were very reactionary, angry way of, as a response to things that were said. But I mean, how would you suggest we go about, doing dialogue or trying to, respond to people who say, really awful things about Islam and the Prophet and things like that?
Yeah, just to give a very simple answer, is I pray one day in my lifetime I see Muslims do question time. That's my answer to you. That you actually we disprove people in public. We disprove people's arguments through intellectual authority and confidence. Because it's there when people see, right, this argument is false and this argument is strong. And I don't think, to answer you directly, we don't have the maturity to do that. That's how you disprove somebody. You don't disprove somebody by banging on their door and making a big thing out of it. You disprove somebody through the art of argument. Because then people see, right, I am convinced, I have itminan, I have kind of a certainty on this issue. And because we don't do that, we are ever more divided. And then you have people who curse, people who ban, people who do this, and then there is no resolution. And it gets more, but through an argument, which is in public, which is debated, right? You see that people come together. We agree to disagree. And I might agree with you, whatever, but at least we maintain cordiality and we move on. So I think that is my answer, to have that set up within our masajid, where if there's an issue, there must be a public debate, there must be an open dialogue. And we don't have that, unfortunately, I think, inshallah.
Thank you very much. I think we'll...
Yes, we are.
we'll...
Because it's recorded, dear Mukhtar, I said we're too insecure. No, I give him the thawab.